areas are putting pressure on the globally interconnected automotive industry. Whether it is additional US tariffs on European commercial vehicles and components or export restriction on critical raw materials, the international division of labor that has long been the foundation of our economy's success is increasingly being put to the test. And at the same time, we in Europe, in Germany, has to ask us how competitive we are. But we will later come to this in our panel. So this makes all the important points we have to discuss here right now. We're looking for your questions on this evening, but also tomorrow when we present some showcases what we are expecting on the IAA transformation. Despite all these challenges, I see above all an industry that's pretty much looking ahead. An industry that is developing solutions with remarkable innovative strength, taking responsibility and actively shaping the future. We invest a huge amount of money to be successful also in the future. This spirit of innovation and determination will once again be on full display on this year's IAA Transportation. But more on that tomorrow. For now, I wish you an enjoyable evening, inspiring conversations, a stimulated exchange of ideas, and now a great panel. And I think I hand over to Simon. Simon, come on.
Thank you very much. We start with the panel here. It will take about an hour, and then we'll go all along to the evening event where we can engage in discussion, small talk, and good food. So first of all, happy that you all made it here. We have people from 33 countries. Even from China, from India, from South Africa, so you made long travel distances, and thank you very much for taking your time for this topic tonight. As Ms. Müller already mentioned, we have difficult times and the transformation that we are all facing, and with this topic, I think we have great guests for discussion where the industry stands, what is necessary now, and what are the trends of the future. So one of our panelists we already have on stage, VDA President Hildegard Müller, and next I want you to greet with a warm applause the CEO of Daimler Truck, Karin Rådström. And we also have the CEO of MAN Trucks and Bus, Alexander Vlaskamp. And last but not least, the Corporate Executive Vice President Sales and Engineering of MAHLE GmbH, Dr. Roger Busch. So this is all on the record. I mean, we have a room full of journalists, and I try to keep it not so long with the questions from my side, because I know mostly when you're a journalist and somebody else is asking the questions, you get nervous and you're like, when can I finally ask my question? Right. So I will head over to you guys in like half an hour, and you can ask your questions directly to the panelists. So Ms. Müller already pointed out that the status quo of the industry is a tough one. Crisis is the new normal. We have geopolitical tensions, we have the tariffs, we have increasing competition, and we have a transformation and also a regulatory framework that is, well, I think we would agree, questionable here and there. So it's tough and challenging times. And at the same time, we have those high goals from a political level. So my first question goes to you, Mr. Vlaskamp. Looking at all those challenges, where do we stand on low carbon alternatives in the commercial vehicle sector and in general, like looking at all those challenges? What would you say is the greatest of the challenges, and how are you facing it and trying to overcome it?
Yeah, thank you very much, Simon, and great to be here. Great to see all of you for this year as we are steaming up to IAA, and we deliver together. I mean, we are here not only industry, we are here a community which all the time meets together, where we all together with our customers, make sure that we keep the world moving, right? And even we keep the world moving, although the times are challenging, although the times are staggering when it comes to economics, challenging when it comes to geopolitics, but it's super exciting when it comes to transformation, super excited when it comes to innovation, and that makes an engineer heart goes up, and that makes of course a customer heart also triggers thoughts, and that's all about it. And the good thing is also that at the same time also we are delivering to decarbonisation. You were into that, and decarbonisation is really important for the long term for our generations after us, and it's possible. Basically, when it comes to decarbonisation of transportation, you have two ways in the metrics to think about. First of all, you need the product times the infrastructure times the total cost of ownership, and that calculation has to fit. So to make sure that actually decarbonized transportation is go up, rather either if you're using electrification or if you use also hydrogen. Well, along that you need to have it available, right? So it's a AAA part of the formula as well. You need availability. It has to be adaptable for all kind of use cases, because that is about transportation, all kind of use cases in our different business, whatever, if you transport people or goods. And it's also very much, of course, about affordability. Our customers have to be able to charge actually these costs to their customers, which are us, the consumers. And that is where it's all about. So let's start with product. Basically, we at MAN Truck and Bus, but also we as industry, we have the products available. When it comes to battery electric vehicles, you see it actually from distribution to medium-sized transportation, construction vehicles, or long-haul tractor units. We have it available. It's available on the market. It will be available on display, and we will have updates also along our products at IAA. More about that tomorrow morning. So don't drink too much today. So that's one thing. When it comes to then infrastructure, that is actually where the challenge starts. That is where the availability is not there. On products, it's available, it's adaptable when it comes to use cases, and it's also affordable because we also bring in the financial services along. But when it comes to infrastructure, there is the challenge. That is where mainly actually the legislator is stalling and staggering the move. There, availability, we are heavily investing. It's Daimler Truck, it's Volvo Truck, and also Traton Group, MAN and Scania, which are investing full millions and which are the largest operator of actually truck charging currently in Europe. We try to make it available, but it's far not enough to make actually transportation with decarbonization growing. And then the last part is the TCO, total cost of ownership. And there, of course, there are various parameters. First is the energy cost. So we need stable and good energy costs when it comes to cost per kilowatt hour. Well, we see right now that that coin is flipping. We see right now with the current diesel prices, of course, that actually the TCO calculation looks much better when it comes to the energy costs. Secondly, we can get used to that because with the European trade regulation on CO2, that part will also stay. So we roughly say that the diesel price of today will be roughly the diesel price when the ETS2 regulatory will be introduced, and that is by 2028. And then the next point, of course, is the availability of the incentives when it comes to, for instance, the Eurovignette, where Commissioner Costa made it possible, and Germany did it, to exempt, for instance, battery electric vehicles or hydrogen-powered vehicles, to exempt them from road tax. And as all countries from this year are about to introduce Eurovignette or toll-like systems, every country in Europe has the possibility to basically exempt and make sure that decarbonized vehicles get a priority, and that also the TCO is better for our customers. So we have a lot of ingredients in place. The challenge is the infrastructure. Here we are ready to roll as well as manufacturers, but we cannot afford to do the broad investments. Here we need infrastructure investors go along, and of course we need electricity there as well. So I see it's possible, but we have to accelerate all together. We will showcase more on that on the exhibition, but it's really a big effort we have to make.
it's a big effort, and of course we're looking forward to see more of that tomorrow. You already mentioned that there's also this regulatory framework. Of course, there's also things that can help, like the oil vignette you just said, but there's also a lot of things that are rather challenging, and maybe also not only when it comes to infrastructure, but to other rules when it comes to the CO2 regulation, possible penalties and all of that. Ms. Rådström, looking at that, do you think that Europe is starting to understand that maybe if times are changing and the whole world is shifting, that politics has to react with a certain flexibility and realism and combine, economy, climate, wealth, all of these things? Or would you say, looking at Brussels, that is not the case yet?
So I would say actually, I think around a year and a half ago, we did see a positive shift where before we talked about transformation into green technologies with a very singular perspective. And I think it shifted around 1 to 1.5 years ago to say, of course, we need to drive this transformation to green energies. And I think we have a huge opportunity to drive that as the European truck industry. But also we need to balance it with competitiveness and sovereignty. So this was a very positive impulse, I would say. And at the same time, the omnibuses discussion started with trying to simplify and to improve the regulatory environment. And I think this was a big shift, and it opened up also, I would say, for us to sometimes have more important meetings with the correct stakeholders. However, unfortunately, we don't really see any real outcomes out of that shift in mindset yet. And if we look at the amount of regulation, actually 2025, we had more new regulations than we've had for the last 10 years. So the talk is heading in the right direction, but the action behind the talking is not really moving as we would have expected. And I think there's a lot of reasons. I think it's, on the one hand, it's kind of understood by the commissioners and on many of the people in the European Parliament and Commission. But I think two things. One, there's a lack of sense of urgency. So a lot of the measures that they talk about is like the grid package and things like that will actually not help us in the next 5 years. It's a much more longer term. And second, I think the whole EU system was set up in a very rigid way not to be able to change direction. And that we're suffering from now because it's not really moving despite the nice understanding and the understanding that these three things need to match.
If you could say this needs to be done right now, 2 things or 3 things, what would they have to change?
I mean, first of all, what Alexander touched on, the CO2 regulation, which is today completely disconnected from the enabling conditions like infrastructure and TCO. And with infrastructure, we have AFIR. With TCO, we have, as you mentioned, Eurovignette and ETS2. So there are mechanisms, but they're completely disconnected and they're not coming in sync. So today we as OEMs, and I know it's the same for the trailer guys, we're sort of sitting on a problem even though we feel we as an industry have delivered. So that would be the first one, to really review the CO2 and pull in the anyway planned review of the CO2 regulation, which is planned for end of 27. That's much too late, so we need to do that earlier so we can actually see that the parts of the equations that our customers need to have in place are actually there. And then secondly, I think it's really looking at radical simplification and doing it for real and not just talking about omnibuses while at the same time feeding a lot of new requirements.
So it seems like Europe is still a little stuck in the talking and not really got to the doing yet. Mr. Busch, we heard from 2 people really affected from this topic, what they are facing, and then now from out of the supplier perspective, would you say it's mostly the same challenges you're facing? I mean, you're in a situation that is really tough, all the things we already mentioned. and then also the shift away in the value creation, the technology mix. Do you see rather opportunities or more risks right now? And what would you say, also looking at politics, is necessary right now? Because as we heard, it seems like the industry delivered, but if you deliver and the framework is not there yet, it's a hard situation.
Let me start with the second part of your
Yes.
question, because I think this is what Karin just mentioned before. I think what is important for us as a supplier is we need to have this kind of security in the planning process. And as she mentioned that, for example, the CO2 legislation would be linked also to the infrastructure system would make much more sense, so that we get a higher planning security. And I think for us as a supplier, if you say, do we see more challenges or more opportunities for us? Let's be quite frank, to be an automobile supplier these days in Europe, it's not a walk in the park. So I can give you now a lot of beautiful sentences, but obviously it's really a quite challenging environment. It's about the transformation we are all in. That means we all, and MAHLE, have heavily invested into new technologies, so the investments are basically there. Now the market is not picking up. And this creates, obviously, you have a lot of fixed costs, and now you have to think of, okay, how can you use this, and what is really the right strategy? And there are, what we see in the moment is on a global scale for us as a supplier is that we have higher insecurities than ever. In the moment, nobody can really predict what is happening on the US market. That's really, we see now some pre-buy effects. Somebody is telling it's pre-buy, others are telling rumors, no, there will be a shift again of EPA. And in Europe, we don't really see that the movement also totally into the new technologies is happening because of what my colleagues mentioned before, this infrastructure topic, which is not there. And there, I would say, only some markets where we see a static trend, more or less. And this is, in the moment, I have to say India for us. I think this is a region everybody's looking in the moment because we see huge growth rates there, sustainable growth rate. I just checked this morning the numbers. I was really astonished to see that basically the market in India last year in medium heavy duty was only 20,000 vehicles below the US market.
Wow.
So it's quite interesting also to see now the comparison of the market.
You're pretty active on that market.
We are pretty active there. But in a nutshell, to come back to my first statement, I think the environment for supply in the moment is quite challenging because it's no more like it was in the past. We were coming to our customers, to the OEMs. We had discussions about future projects. We had agreement on volumes, which might show up in the future. This is how I normally calculated your business case. And now we have to learn basically the volumes are not showing up. And so that means now we have to think of how could we really mitigate then the cost burden, what we have. And it's all about really in the supply chain, how we can really increase the resilience.
Resilience is a key word. Ms. Müller, we have worked together for more than 5 years, I think. And I think crisis is the new normal is something we could put over that working together. And I think also
I always fear every morning waking up.
what happened next. Well, at least one guy who is responsible for some of that is mostly sleeping when we wake up. But what I wanted to ask is, I mean, the things that have just been mentioned, like looking at politics, what needs to be done, becoming more resilient. We haven't even talked about raw materials yet, energy prices and all that. We've been saying that for a long time, and now even more crises came up in the meantime that are all external factors. So the question is, how can an industry become resilient in those times if the industry itself delivers, but it feels like the other players are not doing their part of the job?
Yeah, but first of all, it's really necessary that we can do our side what's absolutely necessary. Investments, innovations, digitalization, and to be on top of the competition. I think that's the first and main point we work on, and that's what we also showcases tomorrow and also on the IAA Transportation. But you're absolutely right, and it was still mentioned here. Is there really the awareness of what is to do on the side of the politicians? For example, the simple story of charging infrastructure. So nobody, no end customer will buy all the products we offer if he's not able to charge. And we look, especially here in Germany or in other European countries, it's still not enough. And I think a lot of countries underestimate the challenge of these topics. So building power grids and so on. That's only one thing, but it's not in our activity. Yes, we can do something in charging points, but not in building power grids for that, for example. So, and another topic is like Karin, you mentioned, Brussels, when you talk to them, yeah, they is the awareness of being more competitive, but the actions are not. And one thing is to ban unfair competition. I think that's necessary, it's a WTO question, and we really have to have an interest to work together as countries. But the other side is firstly, like putting the finger on someone, please are going back, what have we on our side to do to be more competitive? The energy question, the bureaucracy, the loan costs, for example, the taxes and so on, just to look at some very important points. And I think it's clear that other countries go in this weakness we have on our side. So we tell the politicians here in Berlin and also in Europe that the main key they have in their own hand for being competitive. I mean, the industry will be, but we also want to produce here. We want to have employment here, growth, and so on. And then the next topics are there's a mood of protectionism in the world. We have to speak up about this very open, and a lot of questions are coming up from security and so on, and the new world of digitalization. It's a very important question. And how we can find ways to work together also in the future. At the moment, we have a lot of everybody think they can do it on themselves, but I think it's not the effective role. We have good experience with value chains that we are all over the world, and that is not only to produce cheap, it's also to create new markets and so on. And so I think sometimes the countries really have to work more intensive together. It's good that the European Union did some treaties like Mercosur or with India, for example.
Only took that 30 years.
Yeah, maybe we speed up. I mean, with Australia it was 5 years. It was in a hurry if you compare this with Mercosur. But it's, I think this is the new normality. We have to be on that. And to be resilient showcases us also that we have to work on raw materials and production facilities, and that we have to diversify. I'm not talking about decoupling. I think still, I'm convinced that we all have to work on a world that works together and not split up. But a bit more of resilience, that could be very helpful. And there with the CHIPS Act and others, there are some ideas right now in Brussels to do this. But I think we can be more competitive if we have also more solutions on that side.
Coming to solutions, there's also the thing that there's more than maybe one solution. You know, you have the electrical trucks, but you also have the hydrogen trucks, or regular trucks being fueled with carbon neutral fuels. So as a supplier looking at those this technology mix, is it tough to like serve all of it, or is it more an advantage to be able to deal with the different possibilities?
In my point of view, and this is how we, at least at MAHLE, prepared, is that we prepared basically for all kinds of technologies. And I think you rightly mentioned, at the end of the day, for medium heavy duty, we are talking about TCO, and it's a TCO decision, and it's hardly to beat in the moment any diesel propulsion system on the TCO side. A lot of things have to change in the future, obviously, and we also believe that we see on distributor trucks, distribution traffic, dominantly battery electric trucks. Let's see how it will be in the long run for long-haul trucks, where we foresee still, at least when we're talking on a global scale, not just about Europe, that we still see a lot of diesel trucks, but also alternatives. We see the possibility in regard of hydrogen, be it, and maybe that's then for the one or the other, if the infrastructure is there, the ICE combustion of hydrogen. Next step then fuel cell. But what we see as a supplier is also more and more interest on the market for technology which was maybe not in the focus in the beginning, which goes now into range extender. So that we see technology which was there in the past, I would say, on the passenger side. Everybody's aware that there are possibilities for range extender, and we have now some discussions about including also range extender into BEV trucks, basically to replace one of the battery units with a small range extender, which fits basically into the tank. And we will showcase this technology also this year on the IAA in Hanover. And in my point of view, there's not, I think we can agree on where it will go in the long run. The question is how the transition in between looks like. And this is where we believe as a supplier, where we need to offer all kind of technology on the efficient combustion engine side, on the efficient electric propulsion side, but also technologies, especially when you're talking about thermal management system for the fuel cell trucks. Yeah.
And I mean, looking at this topic, I mean, the future of the powertrain, whether it's electric, hydrogen, or carbon neutral fuels, another big topic is everything concerning digitalization, autonomous and automated driving, which is one of the probably biggest transformations as well. So looking at that, especially to this question, would you say we are ahead of competition and can set world standards when it comes to that? When will it be reality is always the question journalists ask. When will they drive autonomously? Maybe you can say something about that.
You want to go?
Sure. So we actually have a software company where we develop the autonomous software, but we put that in the US. And it's for a number of reasons. Actually, first of all, the business case in the US is even better than in Europe because we have an even bigger challenge to find qualified drivers in the US than in Europe, believe it or not. And also they earn higher wages, the trucks drive longer distances. And besides that, we have, especially in the south of the US, a very good test bench, very much support from the state governments to really make this happen. And as well, very easy access to talent when it comes to software. Within Torque, we are aiming by the end of the year to be driver out on public roads. And we think that we will start to commercially scale somewhere around 2028. So it's actually not that far off into the future. And then at some point we will also bring it to Europe. And I already had the question from a journalist today if it's the regulatory is a problem. For me, honestly, today it's not what's stopping us. It's really still to get the technology stable enough. And there will be some additional challenges bringing it to Europe because of weather and shorter distances and a little bit more complex traffic in general. But for sure also on the regulatory side that needs to follow in a good way, but I don't now want to say that's what's stopping us. I think it would be very commendable if we don't try to fully regulate everything before the technology is ready, but actually make sure we get it to work and then realize what we need to regulate or not, rather than the other way around, the way we tend to do things in Europe.
And I mean, probably not only in Europe, but also in China, right?
Yeah, well, at Tractor Group, we actually are developing this within our brands. In Europe at Atlas Level 4, we have showcased actually last year how we along defined trajectories on A9, A8 in Germany have been doing basically hub-to-hub operations. We do the same in Asia with our sister brand Scania there, and we do also with our sister brand in US, based on the same parameters actually, exploration in the southern part of the US right now, where we also have the same timeline when it comes to driver out, as regulatorics go there very coincide with actually what the OEMs develop going forward. And of course we are parallelizing these software-defined vehicle stacks along our vehicles to be able to deliver. The challenge, however, to drive this innovation in Europe is then to get the synchronization of the regulatorics along, and here we definitely need more stick in the ground from the European regulators with also some dare to try, and we will manage the risk. We will, as OEMs, manage the risk with insurance companies going forward. We had, next to Atlas Level 4, together with Allianz, we had a good coincide analysis, where also now with large AI models we can test and train how secure this vehicle is compared to actually a peer group of other vehicles in operation. And this is where we can also showcase that this is safe and sure to operate.
Well, I'm sure that we will see more of that tomorrow or at the IAA Transportation. Ms. Müller, next question goes to you. We already talked a little bit about the US, we mentioned China, we mentioned all the challenges that we are having from tariffs, from protectionism. So especially the German car industry and heavy truck industry, who has made its money by delivering to all over the world. This is a very tough situation. So what would you say is now most important and what's in our own, responsibility, and what do others need to learn that this business model can be successful in the future as well?
I still convinced that on the midterm we will see that's ineffective if we produce a world that's working together. So as I mentioned, but at this time we really have to work on our own competitiveness, and that means that we have a lot of homework to do in Germany as well as in Brussels, as I mentioned. So we are looking at the Grand Coalition to succeed and to fulfill the promises, as well as the European Union. I think you mentioned bureaucracy. Mario Draghi is 2 years ago. He had a very good analysis. You can discuss about some instruments, but the analyze how to be competitive is absolutely clear. And sometimes Brussels splits up too much in different parts, and they are only looking at their part, and the company has to succeed with everything. But it's also that in other markets it's also still competitive. I mean, China has its challenges because of the overheated economic situations. I think the situation in the US is also challenging, looking at inflation and so on. So I hope that we can win, not only for saving the German business model, but in the need of everybody to work more and better together. And it's also, we see a little bit that this also destabilizes societies in every country. The people feel fear and they are uncomfortable about the future and so on. So I think the state leaders have to send signals of secureness to be able to work on hard reform programs. So, and that's not only German or European, I think it's an overall thing we have to do. But in the current time, we have to do, and we have to deliver at our best. And I think we get a lot of ideas, and we get others tomorrow. I still say we will be competitive in the world with products. It's also an announcement to other competitors and so on. I mean, it's hard, it's tough, it will be another competitive situation than it was in the past. But we are sure looking at, when we are looking on the investments and when we look at our engineers and all the ideas we have, also digitalization, there will be a window of opportunities still for us.
You wanted to add?
Yeah, I wanted to add, because I think sometimes we also talk ourselves down too much. I mean, there is still 4 big global truck players in the world, and 2 of them are German, Traton and Daimler Truck. And if you add our market share in the US market, I would say we're above 50%. If you look in South America, also about 50%, way above 50%, maybe 70-something%. In Europe, more than 50%, around 60%. In Germany, obviously 70+%. So sometimes we talk as if we were not competitive, which I think is a large misconception. We are very competitive globally. I can go into all the Asian markets. I think we're strong in India. China, not so much, but we were never there in a big way, to be honest, any of us. So also not much lost. And I think this is a huge asset that we have, and that's why it's so urgent that we focus on competitiveness and we make sure we keep those great conditions for the industry, because I think it's one of few industries where we are really still, as European manufacturers, in the lead.
Yeah, this competitiveness, Karin, was always triggered by, of course, us head-to-head in the market, and that's clear. But secondly, also that the European Union was very pragmatically driving the standards for transportation, and that was also triggering the growth of our transportation industries. transportation industry, the larger transporters on the globe are European founded business, because we together with our customers made transportation very efficient, which only comments to 3.5–4% of GDP. And that was driving actually our export model for our customers, doing more transportation in the rest of the world, because with this efficiency, with our efficient trucks, they were ready to basically export that model. At the same time, we also grew along like this. Now, actually, we see a regulator which is not orchestrating the regulation anymore, which is just dumping it on the market, which believes that the industry are the bad guys and we have to regulate them heavily because else they don't want to decarbonize. We all have families. Our employees have families, and they also want to hand over a great functioning Europe basically to their generation, where they are proud to deliver, to innovate, to work in a steady and sustainable environment. But we cannot do this over basically a 5 to 10 years period. We have to do this over a generation. And that means over a period of 15 to 20 years. And then we are in 2050, where we signed up, all as companies as well, in the science-based targets to do the transformation. And that is where we pledge for, and that is what we want to deliver.
It was almost a conclusion, but it's a conclusion for you guys to start with your questions. By the way, if we sometimes have a weird look on our faces because the AC is blowing right into our necks and it's a little bit freezing up here, but we will survive. So what I would ask you to do is, when you have a question, of course, raise your hand and then say the media you are from and the country, and then just ask your question. And if you would like someone specifically to answer your question, please also do that. Do we have a microphone? We have two walking around, and we start over here.
Yes, I'm Jim Motivale. I'm a reporter for Auto Week and the New York Times in the States. I just did a piece for the Times about autonomous trucks next year in Texas, and this is going to be an amazing rollout. Probably the first world's autonomous truck with nobody in the cab. Several companies are involved in this, most of them European. And this has to do with the fact there's very little regulation on autonomous vehicles in Texas. So, and there's also long routes, well-established routes that are being used. And whenever I talk to the automakers involved, I say, why don't you do something similar to this in Europe? And they all say, there's too much regulation. That's exactly what it seems to be what you're saying here. So what is actually happening with autonomous trucks in Europe? Are there demonstration projects on the road? Or is there anything akin to what is going to happen in Texas next year? Or is it being strangled by regulation? That's what I would ask.
Well, if you look up to MAN Truck and Bus, there you can look up for the Atlas Level 4 project, and there we have demonstrated autonomous operation on 2 highway sections here in Germany. That's possible. When it comes to the technology, there is a bit of ease because the traffic normally is less dense in the US. The weather in the southern part of the US, in particular triangle, is more stable, which fits more to the technology what we have today. But of course, we are working and testing on that, as we also, together with our sister band Scania, testing, of course, also autonomous operation in Scandinavia. So we are testing bedding here, but we all the time need to go first to the authorities to get approval for road sections, to get approval for test operations. We are too far away from actually having authorities here in Europe dare to try without driver and maybe a guiding vehicle. And there actually we are enjoying very much our US operations, where as you particularly mentioned in Texas, we are testing and trying, and also then sooner come to with driver out.
Yeah, maybe just as Alexander said, it's I think there is a lot of tests in Europe, but it's not really ready to scale. and I think you will see the scaling starting to happen much faster in the US. What we do see in Europe is some other use cases than the on-highway Class 8. So it's more like mining and restricted areas and so on. But yeah, there's a good reason why most Europeans have invested mainly in the southern part of the US and why we are based in Fort Worth as well.
And I think what also was mentioned before, just to summarize it, it's a mentality thing. Like in Europe, I think, Karin, you just said it before, everything is regulated before you even start with it, and every possibility is being thought of, whereas in the US, you just go and start, and you do it on the way, and here we haven't even started yet. So that's probably one of the causes for that as well.
Of course, there's probably a happy medium because the Trump approach is to deregulate everything. And the European approach is maybe to regulate too much. So maybe there's a happy medium.
However, regulation is one thing, but liability is not a thing. So it is not just an, let's say, freeway in the US in that sense. You of course have to make sure that you have a safe operating system. And I think I can speak for our industry, at least the OEMs here from Europe, that we have that, let's say, on top of our minds. So
thanks for your question. Do you want to add something?
No.
Thanks for your question, and I think you will see great things tomorrow and in Hanover in September. And the next question, I already saw a hand here and there, so who's next? Right next, no? That was one question. I saw more hands, so come on. Who has another question? There we have two.
Guido, I think Automotive Press. So my question is, when I compare the regulation in the three big markets for heavy trucks, which is for sure Europe, China, and US, where's the biggest difference in terms of CO2 and other emissions?
Who wants to answer this?
I can start. So in the US, we have seen some deregulation since the Trump administration. So we were ramping up, I think, all of us to prepare to roll out more electric trucks. Now with that regulation rolled back and really no TCO case for the customers, we think it will take many years before we start to see a large amount of electric trucks in the US. We do see the EPA 27 coming, so the next engine standard, most likely. You said it's a bit uncertain, we'll see here. I mean, it's not, so it's announced that it should come by the end of the year, but not formally exactly how it will look. In China, what I think they do quite well is to have a systematic approach in regulation. And if I use the examples of how they rolled out BEV, battery electric trucks, they brought a lot of incentives to the industry to innovate early on. And then at the same time, they built the enabling conditions, meaning the infrastructure, and by the way, a very cheap electricity. And I think this is, it's not everything we should try to copy from China, but I think this approach of thinking systematically about all the pieces of the puzzle when you do a big technology change is something where we can learn. And where Europe, I think we covered pretty much already, so also.
Exactly.
Next question, I think we had over here.
Thank you. You pretty much answered the question. My name is Rajesh. I'm from Motor India. A recurring theme of the discussion here was that we need to balance between decarbonization and competitiveness so that it becomes viable for the operators. Do you think Europe kind of moved a little too ahead with the readiness before the charging infra and the competitiveness was built? And as you mentioned, are there any lessons that we can take from China, or how even now India is able to move the infra on highways, especially the charging infra? And are there some learnings that India still can take from the European OEMs?
Yeah, I think the learnings are very much make sure that you orchestrate along these magic formula. So make sure you have the product, make sure you're building up the infrastructure, which takes longer than the product, because the products most likely we have available now in technology. The infrastructure work, which is not really innovation, you just have to do, right? And then the other part is then that the TCO fits. So the energy costs, so the cost per 1 kilowatt hour, that has to fit. And in China, we talk about 8 to 9 cent euro cent per kilowatt hour, and that of course makes the deal. Even if the product actually is a higher investment versus a diesel truck. And then also, if you take this perspective, take it for long term. Infrastructure is normally a long-term investment. So actually, it is also good to make some bets there as a European member state or just member states, because electricity also will be needed for long term for transportation, but also for many other actually powering. And it's also a very efficient transition, or let's say transformation, to do that, and very efficient when it comes to the total power balance. So there are a lot of possibilities and lessons learned to be taken there, and here we really see that the unnodding of the challenge of the equation has to be in the infrastructure, and that is where we have to deliver on in Europe.
So project management.
Yeah.
If I can add one thing to a question from the colleague in India, I think at the end of the day, it's not one size fits all. And you were asking specifically what is the right technology for India, and what are the learnings, maybe also in regard of infrastructure. You know who owns the biggest charging network in India? That's 48 volt. That's ETA. That's an e-scooter producer. That's in the moment the biggest, and really there are fancy technology involved, but that's the biggest charging network what you have today. So I think maybe not jumping directly into BEV would be the right solution then for India. But as I mentioned, if you think about the different technology, if you think about biofuels, which we have not intensively talked about yet, but India was a country who preponed even the implementation of E20 by 2 years. You preponed, all the others are postponing. So that means there's a huge movement. You see a lot of improvement of the infrastructure between the big cities and the big hubs. But for sure, for the infrastructure in regard of charging infrastructure, maybe there are other steps in between before moving then for BEVs, not for the distributor. There you also have TCO for the three-wheeler. We see already today that we have more three-wheeler with BEV than with internal combustion engine, because the TCO is there.
Yeah.
So, and at the end of the day, it's the same matter on the truck side.
But let's also not only move on electric. I mean, let's also look to what is there available on ICE, on diesel technology. I mean, also here, a lot of investments are going on, innovation going on, and you will hear about that tomorrow as well. But also here, when you look to Europe, we can decarbonize and become more cleaner even by investing in modern diesel technology. I mean, Euro 7 is on the brink on to be launched, but current Euro 6 vehicles, they can replace more than 50% of the vehicle park in Europe, which is Euro 5 or older. I mean, the average truck in Europe is 14.2 years old, which is actually on the brink from when we moved from Euro 5 into Euro 6. And to update here the vehicle park, immediately decarbonize Europe, and it reduces also the, of course, the dust situation and other emissions. And that balance we have to make sure is there as well, so that also companies can invest in that. So we have the portfolio, we even investing in the infrastructure, we can list up the TCO, but we have to have the regulatorics making sure that it's stable, it's orchestrated well, and we are ready to deliver as truck OEMs together with our supply base.
We deliver.
Yeah, sometimes I think politicians can learn a bit from industry and so on. and complexity managed of projects, because as that's correct to setting hard goals and say you have to deliver at this time. But the problem is that a lot of politicians also thinking about the instruments, and that's I think it's one of the key problems. They underestimate technical developments, for example, or as we mentioned, if we have now geopolitical tensions and problems with raw materials and so on, they have to be more what are the important KPIs to succeed, and then they have to be able to change the KPI to deliver at the end of the day to the goals. So I'm also very convinced that the idea of climate protection will also be in the world when we also showcase that it is with combining with welfare and with development, not without. When I look at a lot of countries all over the world, they have a long period to develop their own regions and situations and so on. And if we have a model where we fail with our economic strengths, they will follow us, and so we won't succeed with the climate goals as well. So a good product management, giving hard goals, and then give trust to. I think it's the main question is, do they have trust in the companies for finding ways to succeed?
I think we have another question up here.
Yeah, hi. My name is Kira Ige and I work for Nikkei, Japanese newspaper. I have 3 questions, and maybe you have said answers to them before. I came in late, apologies.
Don't worry.
So basically, infrastructure investment in Europe, what amount would be necessary? I mean, what is the figure that you're looking for? That's the first one. When could it be potentially finished in a best case scenario? And what kind of coverage would be resulting in a turning point for you guys?
I love how the questions, every answer would be like a news alert. So
Yes.
let's see how many news alerts you can create.
Please.
Okay, let me start with the first one. So basically, from truck OEMs and ASEA, which is the Association of Automotive Industry, we actually understand and see that for decarbonizing transportation up to 35% Europe, which is the regulatory by 2030, we need around 50,000 installed heavy-duty truck chargers, meaning 350 kilowatts on top, including then out of them 20%, so 10,000 mega charging standard, which we are rolling out now today and which we greatly showcased last week along the corridor, basically Düsseldorf to Berlin. 50,000. Today, there are in Europe 4,000, and that's a very positive sign, including also actually, all the investments we done in MAHLE, and it's also including also, let's say, the projects which are signed off, and it's including also. So now until the end of 2030, I think we have roughly 50 months to go, which means roughly between 750 and 800 charging installations per month we have to put there. So, and that is actually where we are challenging the EU, that we say, well, it's great that you by 2020 have imposed member states on AFI, so the Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Regulatories, but by far we are not there. Yes, we see now some activities in countries like in Germany where this is highly and well granted now through subsidies and investments, a long-term good perspective, but it is not there. And that is where we are pledging that the EU member states, and especially the EU Commission, is basically going back to the drawing board, understands the metrics along the product, infrastructure and TCO, and basically listening to the industry, to our customers, to our supplier base, and say, okay, let's balance this going forward. We are ready to go, we are ready to deliver, but let's make sure we are orchestrating it. Second question.
Should I repeat?
The second, I mean, one was how much infrastructure, and then you said the second one until when. I mean, those two questions were basically answered. The third question was?
Just to clarify, the first question was the amount of money necessary.
Okay.
So maybe we can talk about that too. And the third one was at what? Sorry, yeah.
So the first one was more about the amount necessary in terms of actual investment money, and the third one is about the coverage and what kind of percentage of coverage in installed capacity would be a game changer for you within Europe.
Well, the last thing, I think the game changer starts when you break to roughly 25 to 30% normally of the curve, and then you see an exponential growth. I mean, we have seen that very much also in the city buses. I always look to the city buses, which took now 7 to 9 years really to lift off, where now the number of tenders in Europe, roughly 80% are battery electric requirements. And that is now nearly after 8 to 10 years when we started. And that was also very much there, the depot investments issues, to have not only the charging equipment, but very much to have the grid power available. And that is where it's all about. So therefore also from that perspective, we rather look into the mid of the 30s than of the early in the 30s from time perspective, where it is reasonable to drive this all together with our transportation customers, because they also have to have the power to invest, right? They cannot just go to the bank and say, well, instead of 10 diesel, I take now 10 battery electric vehicles and I have to pay 3 times the investment. Although, yes, I will be over the TCO, I will have the return on invest. But the bank first says, whoa, that's a lot of money, right? And that is also where the regulator can step in. That is say, well, for these kind of decarbonized products, we have different credit regulations, because the regulator is also regulating what our finance companies basically can lend out to our customers. So it all connects together, and if you want to see it, you can also find good solutions. But we have a challenge to find the person who wants to see it and who wants to take the lead to conduct it.
Anybody wants to add on this?
Maybe because you asked about the cost and we haven't answered. So I was doing some napkin math in my head. and Alexander mentioned earlier MAHLE, which is a company we founded together also with Volvo. And there we are investing 500 million. And that will, with the target to produce 1,700 charge points. And then I was just estimating a bit. So if you imagine that when you scale, you become slightly more efficient. So say for 1 billion, you would get 4,000. It's then somewhere in the realm of 10, 11, 12 billion that we're talking about. However, at some point, you will have a challenge with the grid, which will lead to more investment. But if you would just keep the equation a bit simple and focus on the chargers, it's something like that.
I like that.
Just to add one number about the German automotive industry at all, overall we invest in the next 4 years 320 billion euros in research investments, digitalization, plus 220 billion euros in building new plants and facilities. So there is an overall huge investment from the industry, but as mentioned, without the following investments for infrastructure, they won't succeed with it.
So we have time for like 2 last questions. We have one here, one there, and one there. Maybe we collect them, if that's fine for you guys. I saw you. We start here, here, there, and then we have 3 questions.
Jim Motivali from Auto Week again. From an American perspective, we saw the European Union regulators blink a little bit when it comes to the auto regulations, which were requiring 100% EV or hydrogen basically by 2035, and they moved that back to like 90% with some still very tight, and it did seem that the change wasn't very big. It looked bigger than it actually was. So I was wondering your perspective on this, and also whether they similarly pulled back a little on the truck regulations. I'm not sure about that because I only reported on the cars.
We collect the questions so it's easier for maybe there's some overlapping. And I think the next question was from you. Maybe you can hand them mic behind. Perfect.
Johannes Mittagen from Allgemeine. A simple question to each of you, 3 or 4. regarding everything we heard before, would it be possible to match the 2030 goals in the European Union for CO2 emissions? Is there a realistic possibility from today to match this?
It's another headline.
It's another headline, yeah. I can understand. I would do the same if I was you guys. And then we had one question over there. Is there anyone else? Since we're collecting the last questions now. There's one over there we also collect.
Sean Morte from Ireland. You briefly mentioned Euro 7. Are the OEMs afraid to face down Europe and say, slow this thing down? Euro 7 is probably as effective from an environmental point of view, or is there fear of being seen as being polluters, or, you know, like operators have put so much money into new equipment over the last 5 years, particularly Euro 6, and it would be so much easier for them to continue in the Euro 7 realm for maybe 10, 12 years. And has anybody ever done an audit to see what the difference would be? I'm really in favour of looking at that for a long time. I was very intrigued when you mentioned Euro 7 there, but you just brushed on it. So.
And then there was one last question over here.
Florian Engel, One Truck Media, Austria. As you were mentioning your market shares and not being in India, as we will see a big wave from China coming in at IAA Transportation 2026, what's your answer to that, to keep your precious market shares?
Okay, 4 questions. First question was the 235 goals and how much that 90% means, and if there's any similar developments for heavy trucks. You guys decide whomever answers what question.
This one is quite fast, so it was only for cars, and I agree with you, it was more symbolic than a real relief, even though it's not my industry. And unfortunately, no such relief has been announced on the truck side.
The second question was, is there any way the goal can be reached? That is that.
The 2030 goal.
Well, I think we have been basically stating, and we have been investing that along our formula products, we have the products available. So from that perspective, we can deliver. What the challenge is the infrastructure, and there we clearly see that there Europe and the European infrastructure for energy providers cannot deliver. And hence our customers cannot basically make a sound investment decision to order in higher quantity. And thirdly, also, when it comes to the TCO, the European Union is pushing us to deliver on 2030, but at the same time, the European Union is actually lowering the means for driving the TCO because the ETS2, for instance, has now been postponed for the second time to 2028. Yeah. So there is where we say the European Union is not fairly conducting this whole process for decarbonization. Hence, what we have seen now, and that is something with the regulation as well, that at least we have got an, let's say, pre-relief when it comes to targeted amendments. So basically all the battery electric trucks and hydrogen trucks, which we are selling now, they get these credits, and they're counted in the credit system. So we have some relief in that perspective now as OEMs, but this is from our perspective far too little to deliver on the trajectory the EU, the previous legislation von der Leyen was on, and I think it is time to, Mrs. Müller was in, to just read the Draghi report and basically make it pragmatic and deliver.
Give another example. We have a lot of small and medium logistic companies, not only here in Germany, as we have the huge logistic companies, everybody know, but the most transport is from small and medium company. An average company has to wait around about 5 to 6 years until their depot is going to the grid connection they need to charge on their depot. So that gives you also an idea if you count them years. We in Germany are ahead of many other countries in Europe. So it shows clearly that's not in our hands. We bring every product on the streets. We can deliver every range, every big or small trucks, whatever is needed to the customer. But this part is not in our hands. So we are not responsible for reaching the goals. The politicians are.
You want to add?
I was thinking next.
Okay, next question. The next question
Euro
was
7.
the Euro 7 question. Yes.
And I love the question because actually we have both through VDA and ASEA discussed it. And actually as ASEA and as chairwoman of ASEA, I've been to the politicians and I told them we should just skip it. We all have to invest several hundred millions in Euro 7. And I would even, okay, this was not maybe fully aligned and thought through, but imagine we just take those hundreds of millions and put them into electric infrastructure instead, and just push that we increase the take-up of BEV. And they kind of like this idea, but now we've been talking about it for 1.5 years, and there was no decision. And meanwhile, we continue to invest in Euro 7 because we have to be ready when the regulation comes. And actually, in the last ASEA meeting that we had, we said, well, now it doesn't really make sense anymore to push it out because we all fully invested. And if it doesn't come, we have to write it off on our balance sheets, and our suppliers will make have even more problems and so on. So unfortunately, I think it's a good example of where if we would have been a bit more pragmatic, we could have turned around and done something better out of it. Now I think we're past the point where we're actually where it makes sense to stop it anymore.
I was thinking of the other way around, push out the electric.
Yeah. Well, that would require that the CO2 regulation would be pushed forward. There we are not yet, but I think as will have been made clear, the situation is difficult. And I think my colleagues responded, and maybe just one more fact on that one. 2% of heavy-duty registration of trucks in Europe last year were electric, and it has to be around 35% in 2030, we believe, in the industry, in order to get to the 43%. And that requires actually a ramp-up which is faster than any China speed we have seen. So it's definitely a big challenge.
And I think to add on that, Karin, it is not about technology if we want it or not. The regulations, what we have to deliver as a solution, battery electric or Euro 7, they are linked actually to the environmental regulatorics, which the member states adhere to, and where they have to deliver upon in relation to what they promised and signed up to for the society, both the member states as well as the EU Commission. And there are quite heavy fines for the member states if they don't introduce Euro 7 to comply with the actually clean air directives, and at the same time, if they don't adhere to a battery electric, to comply to the greenhouse gas emission directive. So those two directives basically are the sticks in the ground for the member states and the EU, why there is, let's say, no complete orchestration around this. And then the challenge in that orchestration is that the orchestra is not really conducted because every commissioner is owning one of these regulations and regulatorics, and the conductor is not at home, so to say, in that sense.
We had a last question that was concerning the market share and how to keep it up in the future. So there's an outlook at the end of this panel. Who wants to start?
Yeah. Happy to start, yeah. No, competition is great. I mean, we have been competing around the world. We have been talking and bragging about that before. And it's great that we get competition here as well in Europe. That's good. We know that competition as well. So from that perspective, we also know how to work and how to deliver and how to make sure that going forward, we also convince our customers to choose for our brands. And accordingly, we are well trained and prepared for that. Yes.
Awesome. You want to add something? Yeah.
But I mean, there are new players in the market. I mean, with 1.4 billion people living in India or in China, I think we are aware that there are more competitors and that will be much more complicated in the future. But we have to think one time about the percentage, on the other time about the absolute numbers we can sell. So it's also in regard to this question.
Thank you very much. So there's only one question left before we get this done, and it's not car or truck related. So this week another big event is starting, the World Cup. So who's going to win? And whoever tips right has to invite the others at the IAA Transportation to a great dinner or something. So,
obviously Sweden is going to win.
Okay.
And if they do, I promise I will take you to
Okay,
dinner.
perfect. You all have this on record.
I'm absolutely a fan of this goal. Maybe not of this tournament, but I think sure Germany.
Germany.
Well, I can say that FC Bayern is not participating. Yeah, else it would be Bayern, of course. But actually, as I'm originally from the Netherlands, there we have one joker. We start with Curaçao to swipe out Germany, and then as Netherlands we team up in the Kingdom of the Netherlands to get the World Cup.
And then we are all dancing.
Netherlands.
The Netherlands.
I think at the end of the day, everybody's choosing the native where he's coming from. So I'm also for Germany here.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. If you have any further questions, of course, always contact VDA Press or the press persons of each of us up here. And now I wish you a great evening, great talks, and we see each other tomorrow.